everybody. Welcome to another one of my Own Your Expertise interviews. Actually, this is the very first of this year. Well, I posted a pre-recorded one, but this is the second one of the year, I guess we'll say. Still the first day I've done one. If you're out there watching us live on LinkedIn or Facebook, we'd love for you to jump into the comments and say hi. It's always good to know someone's out there watching us, listening. I'm Emily Crookston, owner and decider of all things at the Pocket PhD. I'm the ghostwriter for Rebels, Renegades, and Mavericks, and I love helping experts with big ideas get those ideas out of their heads and into the hands of their fans. Today, I'm sitting down with Traci Philips. Traci is the president of the Innate Coach. She's an executive coach, speaker, and author. And Traci, thank you so much for speaking with me. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about who you work with and what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Emily. It's good to see you. We were just saying off air how long it's been since the two of us have actually been able to meet face to face. I guess we can call it that.
Yeah.
So I'm Traci Philips. I am an executive leadership and performance coach. I work specifically with visionaries. Visionaries are a different breed altogether. And being one myself, I've realized that there are certain things that, work differently. And if we try to fit our visionary selves into the boxes that other people expect to be normal and work for them, it just doesn't work. So I work specifically with usually stage 2 business owners. So those who are just getting ready to launch into big growth, where they realize that they can't wear all the hats in the circus, and as well as executives who find themselves, in that visionary spot, which sometimes can make it a little challenging to answer to those above them and below them. That is kind of who I serve. And I've been doing it for probably in the visionary, like knowing that it was visionaries I was working with.
Yeah.
The accidental thing is like, oh, everybody I'm working with is a visionary. I think I work with visionaries for probably about a good 3 years now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think it's funny. I wrote a post about niching a few days ago on LinkedIn. And so I've been thinking a little bit about that. And I think it's funny how much we don't, you can think that you're working with a certain type of people, but then you are attracting a type of people that maybe, it's not like you don't realize, oh, I could work with this person, but you don't connect those dots like, oh, I work with visionaries. Like it takes time to sort of figure that out. And I bet you also help other people figure that out. Is that right? In your coaching, is that part of it?
Yeah, I do. Well, and that's the thing too, is I think what you just landed on, which is so true, is we discover who we best serve when we discover more and more about ourselves, right? Because we attract who we are in many ways. And that can be both who we actually are or who we think we are.
Yes.
Being able to kind of cut through that and discern, who is it that I've been telling myself? And I'm in the midst of writing my first book. I'll be finished and I'll be launching in spring of this year.
Awesome.
Yay. So, but one of the things that I say is that all of it's good. Some people say, oh, that's my false identity. That's who I thought I was. Now I'm finding out this is who I truly am. I don't think there's any real false. I think maybe there's things that we needed to learn. So we kind of stepped out of our lane, and for whatever reason we need to do that. And that I call our learned and earned skills. Right? That's our zone of achievement. That's what we've achieved because we've worked for it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then we came in with our zone of genius. And it is really important to be able to, meet that, define that, know that that's really the place that we're attracting, our ideal, what you want to call it, market, client, environment. And so that's the piece usually missing. So when my clients come and say, I know what I've earned,
right,
a rep sheet,
right.
But I just feel like there's something else in me that it's not a degree thing. It's not. People use all sorts of language. But it's that piece we want to define because it's that piece that they came to. That's really their mission, right? Those people they came to serve.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I really love the connection between the zone of achievement and the zone of genius. I could see thinking about everything I do through that lens, and I think I've had a recent shift in my own mind and, like I'm a solopreneur and everything has been great. And I'm happy with where I am. I'm happy with my revenues. I'm basically happy with the hours I have. Of course, I'd love to work less. Who wouldn't? But, things are great, and so there's this thing in the back of my mind, like I could do this, the same thing I'm doing until I retire, no problem. But then in the back of my mind, and I'm talking to other entrepreneurs and I'm like, well, but why not try for something different? Why not go bigger? Why, why not give that a try? So that was the flip that kind of switched for me last year. And so I'm starting to think more about how I would grow, how the business will grow. So that's interesting to think about, I've got all this stuff on lock, this achievement stuff is great, but it's not exercising that part of me that's like ambitious and, the what really drives me. And I worry that I'm going to get bored if I actually would stick with this. So I like that distinction a lot.
Well, you're a visionary.
Yeah.
That's a key trait.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know who Glennon Doyle is.
Yes.
But she just came out with the book recently, Untamed, and the chapter on cheetah. It's
yes, exactly.
Coincidence,
I read that book also.
But yes, I know exactly what
yes.
I think it was the first chapter, but in the book. But that's the thing is that we forget because we're trained into these boxes that are called lives. And most people say, I said, I'm not and some people do this. So I'm not saying that it's not a good thing, but I'm not a coach that works with people to stop the bleeding. Right. I'm not things are horrible and I want to just have status quo. I'm just like you said, people are like, my life is great, but there's something in me that it's missing. Right. And they may not use the word better or anything, but there's something missing. And that's that cheetah piece, right? We need to find that cheetah within and we need to define it. We need to give it a space because really that's where we're here to shine.
Right.
It's through the cheetah.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I've started thinking like, I want to leave a legacy. This business is a legacy. It's not just so I can eat for the rest of my life, So very cool. Yeah.
For centuries, we were told just to get by, right? And so for centuries, that's what we've learned is if we can just exist and status quo has become the norm. And so people are really, without knowing it, working towards status quo. And then we get there and we're like, this is it. And then we think, I'm supposed to be grateful for what I have. Because so always looking down instead of looking up and forward. So I love that you're saying that you're recognizing yourself and that more than that, you're embracing it. And you're saying, can I be more?
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, and I think I've held back a lot because I do see a lot of overwhelm in people when they start growing. And I think, why upset the apple cart? It's good. But there's more.
For sure. I that.
So tell me, let's get into some questions. What is your die in a ditch belief?
So, one of the things, and I don't remember what I said to you at first, so I'm not going to try to say what was I. No
problem.
I think it has a lot to do with what we're talking about right now. Is that there's my whole life I was asked, when will it be enough? It's like, what's next? What's next? Everything from you need to be more present to, all of this. And I realized, finally, that's what I'm here for. I mean, visionaries are here to be 10 steps ahead. That's where we live. I mean, yes, we can learn to be present and meditate and all those wonderful things that's good for our human part. But really our service to the world is about what's next, what's missing, what's the solution here? What could be better? And if we discount that, we're not doing what we came here for. And so for me, it's that yearning. If there's a yearning inside, it's something to unpack. It's not necessarily something to sweat about or fret about, but it is something that if we keep, shoving it down, it's going to keep rearing up in places that we might not acknowledge it as what it is. That storyline that is constantly like nagging at us, right? Yeah. And so, I think my die in the ditch belief is that, we get to whatever that is, that itch for all of us. I mean, for visionaries, it tends to look a certain way. For other people, it looks differently. But whatever that itch is, we need to at least, contemplate scratching it. Right. Actually scratching it. It's like, oh no, it's going to get in the way. Oh no, it's not, it's not feasible, or it's not the right time, or, I don't have enough of this for that for it. We're literally talking ourselves out of the very reason we came.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So I believe that that's something that is worth, whatever it takes to embrace, to try to understand. Because I think in some cases with people, it drives them crazy when they don't.
Yeah.
They have all this success and all of this, and they're still fixated on
Right.
the key thing,
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because you can start beating yourself up about that. Like, I have everything I've ever wanted. So why do I have this nagging feeling that something's missing?
Yeah.
And I think, so I wonder, do you have techniques for getting people to sort of look at that piece? Because I think the easy thing to do is, like you say, keep suppressing it and just keep your head down and say, be grateful, do your gratitude journaling. Right.
Up in that box, get back in line.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I like to start people off, is that do you remember, and some people do remember, other people don't. Do you remember when you were a kid and just everything, you were curious about everything?
Mm-hmm.
Everything was like, oh, what's that? What's this? What's that? And like, we get to get back to that because, that's the joyful, playful part of what we're here to discover in life, right? It's that kind of like, oh, what's that? Oh, that's curious. Oh, I don't like the way that feels. I don't like the way that looks. I don't like, I'm curious about why. Instead of just discounting, I think there's many reasons that you could use the whole hour to kind of expand upon all the reasons why as adults we don't make time for curiosity, or we don't even consider that it's not a part of our daily life.
Right.
If it is, it's only to market.
Right. That I was just thinking.
Stick it somewhere. But to get curious again, one of the first things I do with all clients is to help them define what I call the what, how, and where. And the what is your value, but that's from an innate standpoint. So what you were born with, not your learned and earned, but what you came in with. The other is in how, your delivery of that value. What is the natural way that you want to bring your value into the world? Not what you've been taught, but like if I could just boldly go out in the world and say anything and people would get what I'm saying, that would be fabulous. That would be my bold is my, go-to.
Okay.
And then finally the where is, where am I here to serve? What environments best support me, right? To be at my best, but also, what environments am I here to create? So it's ideal client, it's ideal market, it's all those things, but we do best when we're planted in the right soil, right? And so let's define that. What is that soil made up of? It can come also in the environment that we live in, right? So do you like a cozy home? Do you like a more sparse home? Do you, so we play with words, and you can appreciate this, right? Because what words resonate, what words describe that best. And a lot of times what's really, I find fascinating, and this happened in the beginning, I was kind of like, oh, wow, look at that. I didn't see that coming, was then when I was talking to clients about their innate traits, their innate skills, a lot of it came up through what they didn't like about themselves, what they learned not to like about themselves. And so it was things that people told them that were bad about themselves. And so they started to adopt that and like, oh, this thing. And, and at first, I first found it in myself, because when I was thinking about what do I do? Well, I hear gaps in language. I hear where people aren't saying what they mean. And I started to think back for when I was a kid. And that was the thing that always got me in trouble, because, the adult would be like, say something to me. And I'm kind of, it's not true. Filter. So I'm calling the adults in my life out.
Yeah.
And of course, they knew I was right, but you're not going to admit to the kid that you're lying to them. And so they're like, and go sit at the corner.
Right.
So I thought that was bad. I thought that seeing where people were incongruent was a bad thing. When really it was the skill, right? It was a gift. And so I discounted it for so long. It's like, I would think something and like, don't say that. That's bad. or even seeing that or knowing that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's a really great example, because I do think, man, like raising kids is quite a job, and I'm glad I never have to do it, to be honest. Because because so often, those parts of us that we want to express, we've got to keep small in order to succeed. And that's what Untamed is all about, right? And but it really can stunt the growth. And it's true, kids are born naturally curious, right? Just watch a kid crawling around on the floor and like putting everything in their mouth. Like, that they're learning in those moments, right? Everything. And, so we have this drive to learn and curiosity, but if we get the notion that that's somehow bad or wrong, then it gets killed. And I think, I've seen that in the beginnings of my business when I was trying to figure out what my marketing would look like and what my content should sound like. And don't say that, and you should say this, and that's not on brand. But I think, there's a lot of value in just letting yourself chase those threads of curiosity, whatever they are, even if it's not on brand, even if it isn't, directly related to what you're doing today, because that might be that itch, that itch that you need to scratch, right? That's that little cue inside. And so I think it's a lot like hunger. You have to tune back into your body to realize when you're hungry and when you're not, if those things are off balance for you, if they're thrown off. So I think your brain works in the same way. You've got to learn how to tap back into that innate stuff that you're talking about. Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely. We never lose it.
Right.
That's the thing. We're walking around with it all the
Yeah.
time. You just forget about
Yeah, it's like
right?
tuning into it, right? It's like a radio station. Yeah.
Trying to talk to us, and we're always like, shh.
Right.
We're put in the corner early on, and then we start to put it in the corner later on, right?
Yes.
Come back.
Right. Do you ever think that there's a point where it becomes too much? Like, do you ever have to tell people, okay, now it's time to pull back? Like, I could see this leading to a lot of squirrel chasing, a lot of, jumping from thing to thing to thing.
Yeah. With visionaries especially, we're really good at doing the squirrel thing, the shiny thing. Like, ooh, look at that. Because we're so we do tend to keep that natural curiosity, even when it's squelched.
Yeah, I don't even think I could. No. It would feel like prison. It would feel like prison. Yeah.
Totally. But to answer your question, I talk about discipline a lot, but I look at it a little bit differently than it's not the militaristic, kind of definition of discipline, and you got to follow a certain thing in a certain way all the time. It's more being disciplined to yourself. And that's the nice thing about defining the lane. Once we define it, what, how, where, and then we start to look at some of these other things that define the lane, it's just like, oh yeah, as a visionary, this is my lane. And as long as I stay in it, things seem to be going pretty good. I keep up. As soon as I step out of the lane, and squirreling tends to step us out of the lane. Now, it's like, there's nothing wrong with looking, but bring it back to what you're doing in your lane, right? And if it doesn't apply currently to what you're doing in your lane, where are you going to put it? Like we can collect nuts.
Right.
You don't have to like go off after, like, oh, the nuts come from that direction. Now I'm going to go over there. As much as possible, the idea of staying in the lane. And that's what my visionary clients have said, has really helped them a lot, is they say, I hear your voice in my head, stay in your lane all the time. And it really, but until we know what that is, I always liken it to the GPS thing. Is like, if I knew I wanted to go to a particular address in Durham, and I just plugged in Durham, I may or may not get anywhere close to that address. I plug in the actual address, unless there's something, wrong with my GPS, I'll get there. It's the same thing. Is once we define the lane, we know how to measure what is in alignment with that and what isn't. And so, I just tell people it all matters. So just figure out where you want to put it. If it doesn't matter now, if it's not applicable now, if you don't chase it, it doesn't mean you're going to lose it. Just figure out where you want to, I have a box I've been collecting. So downloads come to me, and it started when I was in high school. And I don't know if this happens to you too, because you're a writer, but they would always come in book titles.
Oh, no, doesn't happen to me.
So information, would come in book. And I remember in high school, the first time it happened, I thought it was something somebody had told me to read, a book that somebody had told me to read. So at the time, this was before the internet, I went to the library, and they're like, no, this book doesn't exist. I'm like, maybe they just don't have it. So I go to the bookstore. No, this book doesn't exist.
Wow.
And after that happened a number of times, I'm like, oh, but I would always write it down, and I started to put it in a shoebox. Now I have this very ornate, pretty box that I put these things in. But I don't know how many. I should count them. I don't know how many book titles.
My God.
That's my squirreling.
Yeah.
Right? maybe they will come up at some point and I'll do something with them. Maybe somebody else will have already done something with them. Either way, I think it's really, Einstein was a great visionary. If Einstein hadn't captured what was in his brilliant brain, we would be so much further behind in some ways, right?
Yeah.
And so the visionary is only meant to capture. But how we capture that, is really the question is, we don't have to go chasing it to capture it.
Right.
We can just collect it and go back to it if we need to or not. But I think the capturing part somehow brings it from the ether into the world. And so whether we do something with it or not, just that act of capturing it brings it more into real space.
That's so cool.
So that's what I tell my squirrely visionaries. Like, just capture it.
Just write it down.
Put it in my map.
Put it in your shoebox. I'm curious. Yeah. Have you gone through that box recently?
I have a number, not recently. Okay. I should. Now that I'm gonna get off.
Yeah. Because I bet you've used a lot of them. I bet they've come back around and they've been part of your whatever content you're creating or whatever you're thinking about. I bet they're there. A lot of them.
Mark, you're absolutely right, actually. And it's in the times I have gone back and just kind of looked over various titles. It's funny because sometimes it's kind of like when you see a picture from when you were in high school, you're like, how could I have been wearing that?
How could I have thought that was a good idea? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even know what this book would have been.
Oh, yes. This is why I don't reread my papers from college. Yeah.
But it was significant in our journey, and really our only job is to capture it as I see it. Right? And so that's one of the things is once we have those tools to know what to do, it's like that itch. It's like once we're like, oh, that's what the definition of that itch is. Right. Okay, now I feel a little bit more at ease with it. But it's the not knowing.
Right.
And that's what tends to make us squirrely is that we're being sent. I mean, it's almost like we're being called this that invisible, voice that we're like, only we can hear, and once we recognize what that is and what we can do with it, that is also in alignment with what we're meant to do with it. It brings peace. And I think that's one of the things a lot of visionaries say, like the very first things, like what feelings would you love to have if you could wave a magic wand? And most of them somewhere in there mention peace. My mother used to say that. So there's a quick story about me when I was a kid is my mom would tell me at various times in my life, she used to watch me as a small child and she would pray that I would find a sense of peace. Wow. And I think that's true. And how we come across oftentimes is because we have this motor that's just worrying and going and going and going. And that's a good thing. That's the way we're made. But sometimes because of the world we live in and the conditioned values that we place on things and everything, that can make us feel anxious. Yeah. Or not centered. Or
right.
swirly or whatever.
That motor that keeps your energy up and all of that, it can be exhausting at times, right? You can get sick of it.
I've had boyfriends and stuff over the years go, do you ever turn off?
Right.
No,
turn off. What's that? I don't have an off switch. No. Right. Yes. Oh, I love it. So last question. If you could go back in time and mentor your 20-year-old past self, what advice would you give her?
To keep trusting your gut. I mean, that's the biggest thing. The one thing that I did do that if I look back and go, wow, you right on. Thanks for continuing to do that. It's trust my gut, but I questioned it a lot. It's so trusting it is also not questioning it. So I knew that it was telling me something true, but it was inconvenient information.
Right.
Difficult. And so I didn't always lean into it the way, I probably could have. But I always trusted it. And I think that piece of trusting it and then also trusting also means having faith that, to do. I mean, half the time now, I went through that phase of being a new coach where things, would come up. I'm like, I need to say this. And like, there's that inner dialogue with yourself going, you can't say that. It's like, that's what you're being paid to say, but you can't say, but it might, it's just like, just say it. that's the piece that, if we hold that back, because that's the very thing that we're here to, that's part of our gift, is to give, other people this thing that's coming up in us, whether it's an idea, whether it's a message, whatever that happens to be. But to kind of bridge that gap a little bit more, I would have told my earlier self, like, just, I know it's going to seem really awkward sometimes,
Right.
a little bit, I mean, people, but just know that if it's coming, it's because you're meant to do it, say it, create it, whatever it is.
Yes. Oh, I would tell my 20-year-old past self the same thing. And I always think that's almost impossible when you're 20. Right?
For sure.
It takes so long to trust ourselves. And I don't know if that's not everyone, of course. And a lot of people have confidence. 20-year-olds I meet today have confidence like I don't have right now at 41. But I don't know if it's a cultural thing or if it's a capitalist thing. I don't know what it is, but man, it takes so long to figure out that I actually have learned a lot and I have a lot of wisdom. And if I just listen to myself most of the time, everything works out just fine. If I just trust the process, even if I'm behind on something, like just relax. Like, where are those deadlines coming from anyway? Anywhere they're arbitrary. Right?
Most of the stuff we hold ourselves to, most of the expectations we hold ourselves to are arbitrary.
Yeah, I know.
Why?
Where is that? Why do I think I need to make more money every year? Like, where did that idea come from?
That sandbag out.
Yeah.
Let's try it and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. It's so that dance, you have to have goals or you're not going anywhere. But also in the back of my mind, I'm always like, what? That's arbitrary.
I this way, or maybe, one of the things I think about confidence with kids these days is that, in my generation, so you're a little bit younger than I am, I'm 52. But when my generation, and even the generations before, we came out into the world and we were stripped of our innate value and told you're not valuable until you produce value. So we're like the carrot, you can dangle anything in front of us. So we're like, oh, we're extrinsically motivated.
Yeah.
And I think as we've gone on, each generation has been more about not stripping that innate value from the individual and saying you are uniquely valuable as who you are. Now, how can we augment that? Where kids these days sometimes are in that struggle zone, between the systems that were built by my generation, the generations before, that are based on external, motivation.
Yeah.
Is that they, you don't just arrive on the scene and go, I'm valuable, pay me lots of money.
Yeah, right.
You kind of have to
Pendulum.
show where that fits. And part of that is that discovery of figuring out you're a puzzle piece, where you fit in the puzzle. You don't just be like, here I am, I'm a puzzle piece. Yay. Well, okay, now you got to find where you fit, and you get to show the team, how you bring that value. And you get to show yourself. I mean, it isn't just about proving to others. It's really about, if we don't apply our own skills, we don't know what we're made of.
Right. So. Awesome. Well, Traci, thank you so much for this conversation. I've enjoyed it very, very much. Before we go, why don't you tell people where they can find out more about you?
Absolutely. So thank you too for having me, Emily.
Yeah.
So you can find me at on my website, which is theinnatecoach.com. Also, I'm on Instagram, it's Traci Philips. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me on my Facebook page too, The Innate Coach. I also have a YouTube channel and a page on Facebook that I do with my kind of podcast-ish is what I've been calling it, with my friend Wolwin, where we talk about in the moment conversations. So it's non-scripted, don't have a plan, show up, talk about whatever comes up. So those are all places that people can find me.
Cool. That podcast-ish sounds awesome.
Yeah, with your busy schedule, you get to watch any playback and want to know your thoughts. But yeah, and I also want to thank you. I got to give you kudos for what you did in 2020, or I don't know if it started 2019 or 2020 with your experiment to see, what would happen on LinkedIn. But I love what you put out there. I love what you do. I love the platform you've created.
Thanks.
So
I
yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah. 2020, that was my big experiment. So yes, I'm continuing. Appreciate it.
Big success.
Yes. And I will put all of your links into the comments after this recording, so people watching the replay can see those comments. And yeah, thanks so much, Traci.
Thanks, Emily.